Okay, so I guess we're recording this session. Welcome everybody to this IETF Interim Meeting. I'm gonna check if the page down works, and it works pretty well. So please read the note wells if you haven't read so. Be aware that the meeting is under those not well. I guess everyone is familiar with those, so we might move quickly to the agenda. So we need a JavaScript, a minute taker, and if you haven't signed the blue sheet, please do sign it. I put in the chat the link to the Codim, so I guess everyone can read it. I don't know if, yeah, I'm just adding it right now. So do we have a JavaScript?
I don't know that we need one. I'll be
Okay.
doing minutes.
Okay, right. So I consider we have the JavaScript, the minute taker. It's fine. So please sign the blue sheet. So I see that Ben is online, so we'll go through the documents that have been in AD review. So there are, up to what I know, 4 drafts: the DTLS authorized, the OAuth authorization, the OAuth params, and the OSCO profile. I'm wondering if Ben or anyone has anything to say about those drafts.
Yeah, was still, so I had to finish my food. That the framework and the params are done, and they're just sort of in a holding pattern, waiting for the other 2 documents to be ready, and then I'll send all 4 of them together to the IESG to review, so that way they can look at the framework, and in an instance or example of using the framework at the same time to help understand both of them. The OSCore profile is almost done, very nearly done.
Yeah, I can say something. We just submit the new version for the OSCore profile, and this should address all comments except for the text about. So it includes what we talked about last interim with the update of access rights text, and it's only missing the text about size of nonces. That's the only one thing missing right now.
That matches my notes. I also had left myself a note because we did change the procedure for the update of access rights. I need to have a little bit of a think about whether I should run another IETF last call, because that is different now.
I don't know if it's different. I just think that wasn't really explicitly mentioned before.
Right, and I have not definitively decided that I will. I think I will think about it a little bit more.
You haven't run one yet.
I haven't?
No, you're still waiting. It's still sitting on you.
For the profiles, there has been no last call.
Well, I don't think there's been a last call on the other documents.
On the framework and on the other one, yes, the params. Yeah, there has been a
framework
last call.
And the params. There definitely has been. I will double check on the other one.
The DTLS profile and OSCore profile have not had the last call.
Yes, they are still in AD evaluation. Sorry, I guess my notes were bad. So yes, we will not need to do a second last call. We will need to do a first last call. Thank you. And then DTLS profile, there's a new that I have not looked at yet, but it is believed to address all of my review comments. And so then I guess we could do the IETF last call for the two profiles together.
Okay.
And,
Sounds
and
good.
for
Yep.
for the ACE framework, I see that Ludwig is online. Hi, Ludwig. So I did take a look at the email that was posted about the thread that Ben started about this default value for authorization info. But yeah, I'm not sure I understand what that is about. So if you could.
I don't either.
Okay.
And I have not the time to read up so that I can understand what that really implies. The only thing I noticed, and Jim confirmed that, is that OAuth has not registered any well-known identifiers for their token endpoints and for the authorization endpoints and so on. And that gives me the feeling we shouldn't either. I mean, we are trying to actually mirror OAuth as close as possible and reasonable. And in this case, I don't see why we should do something that OAuth doesn't.
Right. I guess my recollection is that OAuth has like a discovery document that gives you the URLs for all of the different endpoints that you can use. And so you only need to find the discovery document and then you have everything you need.
Yep.
Whereas I don't remember us in ACE having a discovery document.
No.
So we have this text about how the various, the AS and the RS and whatnot can provide for endpoint URL they want, but we say we have a default value of it. And the issue sort of comes in if people take the default value as being like what basically everybody uses and almost an inherent part of the protocol. If we give a default value but we don't have a discovery mechanism, then the only way to use something other than the default value is if you have really configured it on both sides, and that may not happen very often. So if we are in effect saying that there's basically a part of the protocol that puts a URI path in the same namespace as the rest of the web server or the co-op server or what have you, that's sort of us as a protocol designer trying to tell the server how to name their things. And it really should be the server's idea of how to name their resources. And so that's sort of where the BCP 190 considerations come in, that the names and the paths on the server should belong to the server and not to the protocol designers.
Carsten?
Yeah, so in co-op we have a discovery mechanism, and we could simply do what's needed to make ACE visible to that discovery mechanism.
You mean
Yes.
resource directory custom?
Well, the resource directory is the way to distribute this information, but we have /.wellknown.core/core, and that's the place where a node could say something about the structure of resources it provides.
Including the auth info resource then. I remember we had that discussion, or we had a very brief discussion about it, Carson, and that was really helpful for me because I haven't gotten the competence, and the time to look into how it's done in core right now. I haven't got the competence and I don't have the time to get it.
So I have a follow-up question. In the ACE key group com, we registered the interface description link target attribute ACE group to indicate that the KD or one node or the resource server, whatever, it implements this bunch of resources. And I saw, Carsten, that you suggested that the ACE framework register resource type link target attribute values instead of interface description. So is that like comparable, and how is that? Yeah, how is that different?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 2012, when we did this, we didn't have a very clear idea of what this was going to be. And the interface link target attribute really just says, this is the kind of behavior you can expect for this resource. And the resource target says, this is the overall behavior and purpose of this resource. So that there is not a very strong distinction between those two, but it's a little bit like multiple inheritance in a programming language. So you can have multiple interfaces, but you really should, in the end, come out with a single resource type.
Okay, then I'm not sure that we are doing the right thing, maybe. I don't know if we should register interface or resource type. From what you say, resource type sounds like the right choice for the ACE framework.
Probably.
Yeah, and then I'm not sure about the ACE GigaCom.
Yeah, unless you expect some other SDO to go ahead and say, we have the OMA thingy, and this actually is ACE GigaCom thing, then you probably should go for RT.
Okay, thank you.
So the question I would have is, should we have a discovery protocol document, or is that something that is currently missing in this working group? Or
My question would rather be, can we please have a document separate from the framework so that we don't
Yeah.
have to delay the framework?
oh yeah, sure. No.
If it's only about registering just resource type, why we could add it to the framework in the IANA section.
No, I cannot. I physically don't have the time to do anything but click a button here and there sometimes. That's my issue. I cannot invest more time.
Maybe some of your co-authors could.
Or the chairs give you a new co-editor.
Because I mean, like, the document will require attention at some point, right? Like, even if it's just for the ISG review, etc.
Yeah, but this is like a whole new, We redo the IETF last call if we do this.
That's not entirely. I think the sort of thing that we would be doing here is something that we could equally well be adding as a result of IESG review comments. And we typically do not do another IETF last call for the changes that result from IESG review.
Okay.
But Ben, because I have the impression that the discovery is likely to open a new discussion. So I'm wondering if anyone has an opinion whether it should not be something separate, or.
So I have a simple question. Is that something that the framework would define, or is this really something that the profiles would define? It will look very different for MQTT than for other things.
Well, the fact that it depends on the protocol you use. For example, CoAP has a discovery mechanism that we like to use if we use CoAP, but we won't use it for MQTT because it uses TCP. Makes me believe that we might want to actually push that to the profiles. Or makes me hope that I can push that to the profiles.
I mean, so I guess what I had in mind, and maybe this is totally wrong, Karsten should pay attention and correct me, but if we were just to basically define the new CoAP resource type for, well, I guess that's a question. Would it be for the resource that is a discovery document for all of the ACE things, or would it just be for this is the AS endpoint, and we have the resource servers define have a resource type for their auth info points. I guess maybe it's not quite as simple as I first thought. We should have a bit more of a think about it.
Yeah, I think we need a resource type per kind of endpoint. Maybe one or two of them actually are interfaces. Let's think about that some more. But the different kinds of endpoints should be findable. And I'm really not talking about endpoints because that means something different. I'm talking about entry points. So the places that you need to go to if you start talking with a device or a server for the first time. We need resource types for those. And I agree with Ludwig that really we want to do those in the profiles, even though the results will look very similar for DTLS and OSCORE.
Wait, this is like, we define the auth info and all the other endpoints in the framework.
There are no other endpoints in the framework. The rest is OAuth, already exists in OAuth. So you can use the OAuth discovery. Or
how do you find the things? Things you cannot find using OAuth mechanisms, we need to define a resource type for. For the
right,
others,
and that would be the auth info endpoint. All the other endpoints are just the same as in OAuth. Unless I'm really, really mistaken now, but I don't think so.
The entry point to the AS is given to you by the resource server when you attempt to access something and get an access denied. It is currently not telling you where to post your token. So that's the only one that needs to be done, and that probably would be per profile basis.
But the auth info default name, as well as default name of token at the AS, these are defined in the framework.
Right, but the RS tells you where to go talk.
So we don't need a default name.
So you don't need a default name.
Okay, sure. Okay, let's assume that we remove that one, but the one at the resource server, the auth info, that's still defined. Like it appears in the framework, and then the profiles use that. That's why I'm thinking.
Yes, but you can define that in the profiles. So you guys can sit down and agree on a common way of doing it and be happy.
I think Jim's proposal is to say that the framework just talks about the auth info endpoint and does not say anything about default path or anything like that. Does not refer to /auth info. every place you might talk about it, it will just say the OFC info endpoint, and then it's up to the profiles to give an interpretation to that.
So each file would then do what? Register its own? That doesn't sound. I mean, I understand one would register, but then the other profile would use that, or?
Would be fine.
So would the OFC info endpoints for OSCORE and DTLS be different or the same?
It's the same, at least right now, I think.
Well, that argues for doing it in the framework then.
Yeah, that's my point.
But it's specific to the use of co-op.
Yes.
And there has been very
But
loud voices
the ACE
that the
framework-
framework should not be specific to co-op.
The
It's
framework
not
right
me.
now recommends co-op, right?
Yeah. But we've had very loud voices claiming we
Yeah, but
shouldn't.
if you're not doing co-op, then you can use the OAuth.
So what you could say is that the framework defines this resource type for the use by profiles that actually use co-op.
Yeah, like to me, this would be a small, like it wouldn't even require much text in the document. It's just IANA registration. That's it. Yeah, that's what I
Okay,
understood.
I have no idea where to start even. What do I register there?
I can send you text.
Really helpful.
Carsten, aren't you one of the co-authors? By the way.
Of
Or
the
no, you
framework?
aren't. No, you're
No.
not.
Nope.
Sorry. Mixed up with probably the actors document.
Well, yes, and in particular the GTLS
Framework, yeah.
profile.
But like, as long as this doesn't require another last call, because yeah.
I think I agree with Ben that this would be one of the usual things to come out in an ISG review, and we do these all the time. And it's not a technical change in the sense that the protocol changes. It's just a name that has been reserved for use by the profiles. And of course, the profiles have to go ahead and actually use that name.
But if it's a reasonable suggestion and it's done the way you should do these things in co-op, then I don't see that as a problem.
So we have a small bike shed thing. What should be the name of that resource type?
Marco, have all the stuff you register started with OSCORE or with ACE? ACE dot.
I think ACE dot in this context. I can double check.
Maybe Marco and I can bike shed that name offline and send a proposal to the list.
I have no strong opinion on how we call it.
ACE dot here anyway. We're doing that here for resource types.
You say that again?
ACE dot something.
Oh, good, good. Okay.
Here for resource types, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like Karsten is going to draft some text for the framework and send it to Ludwig. And then once we have that, we will have a better picture on what the profile documents need to take into as their changes.
Right.
Okay. I don't
Thank you very much for the offer to help, Karsten. It's very much appreciated.
Yes, thank you. I don't remember that there were any other open items for the 4 documents that are currently out of the working group. So does that bring us to Marco's documents, chairs?
Yeah. So just a comment. When we're trying to find the name of the resource, I don't want to have everyone waking up for that. So if you're not completely against, please abstain. So Marco, you're
Yes.
next.
Yes, this one, thank you. So an update on this draft that was just quickly announced in 2 minutes in November at the Singapore meeting, and describing an admin interface at the OSCOR Group Manager. Right, so we have another document in ACE, in fact, describing an interface of the Group Manager for candidate group members that through that interface can join the group, get the key material to operate in the group, and later on continue interacting with the group manager. So what is missing yet is a different interface at the group manager again, but intended for an administrator to create, set up, and delete those OSCOR groups. Next slide, please. Right, and this is what we define in this document. In fact, it's a different RESTful interface for the administrator. That is the first thing to be done before the group is properly set up and can be joined by candidate members. And interestingly, the interface and the way groups are represented here is very similar to the pattern used, for instance, by the intended co-op ABSA broker. Practically, we have a single instance of a group collection resource, the group manager, say the example path/manage. And then we have under that resource one group configuration resource per OSCOR group created at that group manager that you essentially identify over the same path, appending, for instance, the group name. And well, of course, we use ACE for the sake of access control for the administrator that here becomes the client, while the group manager is again the resource server. And we just use transparently transfer profile of ACE for the secure communication between administrator and group manager. Next slide, please. Right. Well, what we showed in November last year was version 0, and after that we got a review from Jim. Thanks a lot for that. That we mostly addressed, in fact, in this revision 01. We especially organized better the parameters describing the current group configuration, and we enriched the interface with more functionalities, describe what can happen as side effects to the group members in case the administrator changes something delicate, like the algorithms used in the group or their parameters. Other than revising the examples we had already, we also added examples in Coral, and Klaus also joined the author list. Next slide, please. Right, to give a more operative overview, some operations are available at that single group collection resource. So the idea is to send a post request to that resource in order to create a new OSCOR group, and possibly providing at that time already some values for the configuration parameters. Instead, sending a GET or a fetch request, if it's interesting to specify some filter criteria, it's possible to retrieve some of the configurations, all or some of the configurations of the currently registered groups. Next slide, please. Well, instead sending a request to a particular group configuration, well, with the GET, you just retrieve the content of that configuration and the full list of parameters with values. A put is, for the time being, intended for fully update the current configuration, just overwriting the current one. And with delete, you can destroy that resource and dismantle the OSCOR group. Next, please. Yes, as I said, we split also the parameters describing how the group is configured now. The first set is the configuration properties, essentially describing how the group works from cryptographic point of view. And then we have the status properties with, well, anything else. If the group is currently active and communication can actually happen in that. The name for the sake of announcement and discovery. A title as intended to be more descriptive of what the group is about. Then later on, we also have the joining path, which is actually a URI pointing at the side resource at the group manager where joining nodes should send their join request instead, as described in the other ACE document. And we also have the URI to the authorization server where those joining nodes should check to get an access token first before joining the group. Next slide, please. Right, just some selected examples from the draft. There are more there. A get to the collection resource returns to you essentially the list of all the configuration resources currently present as corresponding to the registered OSCOR groups. So practically the links or the entries to later on send a request to those groups. Next, please. Yeah, a post to the collection resource for creating the group. You can see here some values are specified for some of the parameters. For other parameters, default values apply at the group manager. And when a new group is created, the group manager actually creates two resources. So one is the group configuration resource I've talked about, and that's again intended for the administrator. And in parallel, a corresponding group membership resource is created, and that's the one intended for the joining node sending the join request. And next, please. Yes. Final example, I think a get sent to a configuration resource just returns the full current configuration of that OSCOR group with all its parameters. Next, please. Yeah, we have also a section describing what happens in the group, especially to recurrent group members, if the administrator changes something delicate, like if it switches off the group as inactive, or if it changes current algorithms and parameters. And especially if the signature algorithm or its parameters are changed. Current group members may not support that anymore. In that case, they just have to leave the group, essentially. Or they might just end up with a public key that is not compatible with the new algorithm or parameters anymore. So in that case, they can either leave and join again, providing a new compatible public key, or just stay in the group and upload a new compatible public key with the interface we have for them, the group manager described in the other document. And considering comments from Jim, we are working to simplify the section because it was in its current version too difficult to read. Next slide, please. And we are done. Yes, we are defining a RESTful interface for an administrator of OSCOR groups at the group manager to create, configure, and delete OSCOR groups. So it goes hand in hand with the other interface intended for joining nodes. And we have examples both in format or CBOR and Coral. As immediate next step, we plan to submit a revision before the cutoff, mostly addressing another review we got from Jim on version 1. More comments are welcome anyway. Thank you.
So I'm wondering what kind of issues this document is raising.
Well, there's currently no interface or mechanism available to practically set up the groups. We are magically assuming they are there already. And this is a way to create and configure them.
Oh, no. I mean, in your document, what are the things that you think might need some specific discussions?
I think Jim is proposing in side comments reviews of Coral to further improve the interface here to provide even more information in responses, like giving indications of how Coral forms can work for requests from the administrator following the very first one. It's not really an issue, but there's still room for design choices ahead.
Okay.
Mostly for Coral.
Okay. And I don't know, Jim, I suppose that you're willing to those documents to be adopted. I don't know what is Jim's opinion on that. Should we wait a little bit, or should we start a call for adoption soon?
I would not object to having an adoption call on this document sooner rather than later.
Anyone has a strong opinion against having a call for adoption?
I don't have an opinion, I have a question. So the group manager in some might be an application that knows from its application stage which groups to create and delete and so on. So it might not actually provide this admin interface. Is that what you have in mind as well?
We didn't think of that, but sure, if it knows everything already and does everything of its own, yeah, then there's no need to export an interface to another entity.
So this is really for group managers that are kind of decoupled a bit from the actual application that decides it needs groups. And then you can have a network element somewhere that provides this functionality with the northbound interface, which is the admin one, and the southbound interface is the group management interface.
Yeah, good point.
I think that would be important information for people making use of this specification, that they don't think they have to have this interface for every group manager, even when there is another way for the group manager to already know what it needs to do.
Right. Thank you.
Just for clarification, do you mean when the application is a single group?
If there is an application running somewhere that is creating groups and removing groups, and from the application state, it's clear what those groups need to be. You don't need this admin interface because it's the application state that controls setting up the collections. And I think similar to the resource directory, which can be described as a relatively independent network element, or can be defined as something that provides an application that provides a resource directory interface in addition to its other application interfaces. We have a similar situation here.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So it's really for an administrator external from the group manager itself.
Yes, or it might be a useful interface within your application server. So that's okay. But all I'm trying to say is, if you already have another way to get this information, you don't have to provide this admin interface with the group manager.
Okay. Any other comment, or should we move to the next presentation?
Right. This was also very quickly advertised November last year in Singapore. Why we're having this document, access tokens, other than becoming expired at some point, they can also be revoked earlier than that for a number of reasons, like interested parties are compromised, or there's a change in related access policies or is profile to use. And OAuth partially covers this, admitting revocation for clients, but not for a resource owner or the resource server. And it's not all in all perceived as a big problem, because tokens are supposed to have a short lifetime. So in ACE, it is different. Tokens last much longer. And we would like to have a way for the authorization server at the end of the day to inform interested parties about tokens that are expired, revoked but not expired yet. So next, please. And here we are, in fact, defining an interface and a resource at the authorization server, having a single instance resource after draft revision, of a token revocation list, or TRL, essentially containing the names or hashes of tokens that have been revoked, though not expired yet. And that said, a client or a resource server can just send a GET or even observe that TRL resource to get back the list of pertaining access tokens or automatic notification about that for pertaining access tokens that have been revoked. And there are a number of benefits. Well, we can serve both clients and resource servers. We are complementing the introspection mechanism, and there is no need on clients or resource servers for more resources or endpoint. And this version 1 already was the result of a review on the list from Travis Spencer and a lot of side discussion with James. Thank you both. Next slide. Thank you. So what's the rationale? We give names or identifiers to tokens, but not in the sense of CTIs. We actually name tokens with hashes as described in 6920. And we are actually able to support the case where the token is transported either on CBOR or on JSON. So this token revocation list on the AS is essentially a CBOR array of the token hashes of tokens that AS issued, are not yet expired, but have been revoked. So if a token is revoked, its token hash is added to the list. Later on, when it eventually expires, the token hash is removed. And interactions are pretty simple. So the client and the resource server somehow registers at the AS through a mechanism that, as far as I know, autoscope even for ACE itself. But in the response from the AS following the registration, they get back the exact URI of the TRL resource at the authorization server. And later on, they can send a request or observation request to remain up to date. They would get back only what exactly pertain to them. So not the full list, only the revoked tokens that have been issued to that client only, or intended to be consumed to that resource server only. But we are also admitting the case of a particular requester, like a system administrator, that instead can retrieve just the full list, because the whole of it is pertinent to it. Next slide, please. Yeah, just to give an intuitive overview in ASCII art, here we have the administrator, 2 clients, 2 resource servers. We have 1 client with 2 access tokens, T1 and T2, to be consumed by only RS1 or only RS2, respectively. And then client who has only a token T3 to be consumed by RS2. So let's say all of them are registered at the AS, all of them observe the TRL resource. And at some point, all those 3 tokens get revoked. Their token hash is included in the TRL resource, and the authorization server sends the 5 different notifications indicating only the pertaining token hashes to each of the 5 requesters. Next slide, please. Right. And we started thinking of this with a single mode of operation that we call full query. Where essentially the requester sends a GET request or GET observe, and the result coming back is the whole pertaining portion of the TRL resource. Jim suggested also to consider a diff query mode, where the requester is interested not in getting the full current content of the pertaining part of the TRL resource, but only what happened in the latest specified and updates. So in this case, the response would be a collection of diff entries, 1 for each of the latest and updates. And each diff entry in turn would specify the token hashes that for that requester were added or deleted at that update. We got a recent review from Karsten, and we are working to simplify both the interface and the representation of the response payload in diff mode. Thanks for that. I conclude with the example we have in the draft, just to fix ideas. It's pretty basic. We have only 1 resource server here, considering the full mode, and observing the TRL resource. So it registers first, gets back the URI to the TRL resource, starts observing it, of course, gets immediately back an empty CBOR array. Then later on, the AES issues 2 access tokens to some of the clients around, but to be consumed by the same RS. So next slide, please.
Ben, do you want to make a comment or a question now, or?
I think I can wait to the end.
Okay.
Can you move to the next slide? Thanks. Yeah, at some point, access token T1 is revoked, so the authorization server sends back a notification indicating that to the resource server. Then later on, T2 is also revoked, and the second notification is sent indicating both access tokens. Even later on, T1 eventually expires. So a third notification is sent, now indicating only T2 as part of the pertaining portion of TRL for the resource server. Next slide, please. Yeah, to summarize, this is an interface with EAS supporting get or get observe into grain mode to notify both client or resource servers about tokens issued for them or related to them that are now revoked, though not expired yet. And there's no need for new resources or endpoints at clients or resource servers. And this revision is the result of process comments from the review from Travis and side discussion with Jim. And we plan to have a revision before the next cutoff, also addressing a review we have recently got from Karsten. Thanks. That's it.
Okay, I will jump in. I had, I think, 2 points. The first one was with the sort of diff update that from Jim's review. First, this does seem pretty useful, but I'm not entirely sure if the sort of give me the last n changes is the most effective way to do that. It actually reminded me a lot about the JMAP protocol, which was originally JSON Mail Access Protocol, but they changed it to be a more generic name, and I forget what it now stands for. But there's a working group, they put out documents already, and what sort of the general concept is to give a name to the state on the server for a given resource, and like this name is probably going to be some output or similar. And so then the server, the state of the full TRL, or it also sends back a hash value that sort of identifies that state in time of the resource. And then when you go and ask for, you can say, this is the name of the last thing that you gave me, please give me changes since then. And they even have a little bit more of a complicated setup where if the total number of changes is too many, you can get some intermediate state back. And I noticed that there may still be more if you ask right away. I don't know if we would need all of that complication. But the idea that you can have an explicit name and say, give me changes from the last state I had, will let you be sure that you're getting all the changes, or that you know that you missed some. So like if your state name is too old and the server has dropped some of that since then, we'll explicitly tell you, sorry, I can't do that because I lost some state. You need to fetch the whole list and start over again. So this sort of named state might be worth looking into. And then my second point was that if we're going to use a hash of the token to identify the token in the TRL, everybody needs to know which hash we're using. And I took a quick look through the document, and it says, you pick a secure hash and whatnot, but I didn't see a way for a sort of in-band indicator of which hash used. I think that everybody would need to agree on that in order to be actually interpreting the values in the same way.
Correct. And on the second point, well, what sounds obvious to me is having that specified in the registration response from the AES at registration time.
Seems likely to work. So should actually write it in the document, I think.
On the first point, it sounded to me like even a third mode of operation, actually. If I understand correctly, it's more oriented to snapshots. Like I'm interested in the, I don't know, second from last version and last version you had about me.
I guess you could do something like that. It's not clear to me that that was the primary reason that JMap did it that way. But I also was not deeply involved in the JMap work. I just reviewed it as the ISG.
So I think Carsten,
Yeah, this kind of situation where you have a series of things that gets added to, that's exactly what's discussed in this series transfer pattern draft that I sent the name of to the chat. And I think it might be worth looking at that draft and seeing, do we have a conventional way of handling this kind of situation already? And if yes, we might want to use it. If no, we might want to add this particular case to the series transfer pattern draft, so we know how to handle similar situations in the future.
We have been looking into that. There seems to be a mapping, in fact, between the way we have diff query mode now and that draft.
Okay.
And thanks for that pointer too. So Ben, do you think it is worthwhile we think better also in terms of, yeah, full latest versions in the recent past?
I think for the specific TRL use case, I can't think of a reason you would want a specific version that is not the latest version.
Okay, for that, the full query mode returns just the current representation. So
Yeah.
I think the reason why Jim suggested what evolved into the diff query mode was to just catch up with some missing notifications that were lost as non-confirmable, and that was a way to get just missing chunks and build a full story again for the requester.
Right. I think that's exactly what I had in mind for the use case.
any other comment? Is Carsten reconnected or?
He's reconnecting, he says.
Yeah. So, well, we're going to ask Carsten if he has any comment, and then we may briefly go through MQTT.
Hello. I'm here. I haven't prepared slides because there's not much to say, except that a version 5 being submitted that answered the topics that were raised in the previous interims. And Jim sent a review which we can address the majority of the comments. There are not major technical issues outstanding. There are editorial ones and new definitions I have. There are a few outstanding things to discuss regarding converging what session state the authorization, the resource server, the broker keeps, as well as format. That kind of outstanding to discuss. Interim, we have mentioned AIF as the standard scope for the for all the profiles. Regarding the AIF, I've also looked at what we've defined However, I don't have a full resolution because the scope that we tested in the MQTT profile serves two purposes. One, to limit the permission verbs to publish and subscribe, and the other is enable those verbs to be used over a topic filter, which is the standard way in MQTT to communicate what resources you are interested in a kind of summarized having the permission for topic filters was quite handy, and that we've used that. So I'm not too sure how these two things can be brought together at the moment, and whether that is stopping the MQTT profile progressing further.
Yeah. So do you? I mean, I guess you're sort of blocked now.
Yeah, that question, yes. Yes, because in the scope, basically a simple recommendation file does not also require a certain scope to be used. It's just a recommendation that it makes. And we put that recommendation because we got feedback before that it will be useful to recommend a scope format, a style in the profiles.
I have some discussion about scope as well in my presentation here for the ASCII GroupCon, because we also got we wanted to include this AIF scope document as a recommendation, and that doesn't really work. So we want to discuss that.
Okay.
I think the major thing that I wasn't too clear on is I can understand that the new keywords can of course be added, the publish, subscribe, but the idea was to be able to use those permissions over a subset of topics, which are really nicely described with the topic filters using wildcards in MQTT. And I wasn't too sure how that is now represented in AIF when you want that permission to apply to multiple resources.
I'm not positive that I think that using AIF makes sense anymore, unless we also have a text version of the AIF stuff, because the scope has to be a UTF-8 string if we're doing JSON auth.
That's what you have base64 for.
Right, but then I have to figure out the difference between a base64 string and death string, which can be kind of fun.
Well, what I understand is that for MQTT, it ends up introducing a new way MQTT used to work. So for that reason, I think it was being asked whether we should continue with this new format, even if it looked promising in the beginning.
Can we take the scope discussion on my slides, so that, because we said that we would want the MQTT format of scope to work also in the ASCII GroupCon, so we need to adapt to that as well.
Yeah. So that was. Oh, please go.
When you propose scope, basically resources as top, basically. So I can understand why the scope is not. Am I dropping?
For me, a little bit, yes.
Yeah, for me too.
The question was last time whether the scope we defined in the MQTT profile enough to be adopted by others. I had to admit that when I proposed it, I was really thinking MQTT specific in terms of topic field, etc.
So I didn't hear you.
I was saying that the scope discussion can be on Francesca's slides.
Okay.
That's fine. The state information that is kept for continuing sessions at the RS. Jim was suggesting that the token used should be part of the state. And I was questioning whether that means the client can only continue a session with a previous token, because if it got a new token between the two, then it would want to use the new token to reconnect. So there is a discussion ongoing in GitHub about this. So that's the only slightly technical remainder, basically, for the MQTT profile.
Mm.
I hope you heard me now.
Yeah.
So the rest of the suggestions, definitions, and typos have been fixed. It's just these two that I need to get a to move further.
Okay. And do you need help to solve this issue, or are you about to solve it?
I think I've opened a issue in GitHub with Jim's comment and commented back. So if I've understood him correctly and he if we can converge there, it's fine. It's just that it is the question of what this what we allow the client to do. Do we now the clients can continue sessions in MQTT, and when the client reconnects, it has to still provide a token. If the token is part of the state, then we expect that to be equal to the old token. However, if the client got a new token between the between these two events, then we have an issue. I suggested the client token may be part of the state rather than must be part of the state. And in that case, we are not really authorizing the continuation of the session. We are authorizing the just client coming back. And I thought that was acceptable because MQTT anyway recognizes clients only by client ID and finds client state by just using client ID as a key. And that's why I thought it was acceptable that way. And it's still secure because the client needs to provide a token, and that token is still verified. It just doesn't authorize that it's the same client that's continuing, and there might be a mix-up. However, it doesn't create any remaining message that is delivered to the client. It will be covered by its token anyway. I'm not too sure if you understand here the difference between a may and a must of what the session state keeps.
I have to spend more time on that, but I don't see major interoperability problems, but I have to go through that. I'm wondering what Jim think.
I need to sit down and try to build my attack case better.
Okay. Yeah, so I will also have a look.
Solution would be, the other solution that I propose, which I will add to GitHub, is that if we want to really do better client identification than original MQTT, then we would have we can say continuing clients can only connect with their old token, where even that they expired, and then we do a key checking there, and then immediately they have to submit a new token by using token. So they connect the old token and because they know that that's expired. That's another way of going about it. But that means the continuing clients can only use the challenge-based mechanism to authenticate to the RS. Anyway, so that will be in the issue in the GitHub. So that's one issue remaining, and the other issue is a scope issue.
Okay, so we'll go through the scope issue through Francesca. Any additional comment?
Michael Richardson, can you be shy and turn off your camera? Thank you.
I thought it was turned off. So confusing.
So I just have a quick question, probably because I haven't followed this, but it sounds to me this is somewhat related to the update of access rights discussion we had last meeting, where because for the ASCII GroupCom stuff, we're saying that when you post old token, that should not sorry, for the OSCOR profile stuff, that when you post the old token, it should not have for consequence to derive a new security association. Is that?
Yeah, here the token would be used to just show to the RS that I am the client that's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was saying that originally, if you look at MQTT specification, when they do continuing sessions, they basically only mechanism to identify this client that's coming back is the client ID. They use the client ID as the parameter to key to look up the client state. And they don't, that's why what I was falling back on, just to check which client is continuing. However, there might be an issue in this case where client A with an ID joins with session continuation, drops, then a client B comes with the same client ID, and then the state is kept for the client, and the RS thinks it's the same client, but it's not. It's just the same client ID, two different clients. In that case, since the token is present and validated and verified, client will never get any messages that they were not supposed to get, and they will not be able to publish to anything that they were not supposed to get anyway. So that's why the profile at the moment token as a RS state as a may. If you want, you can confirm further whether this is the client that's really continuing. But that's where the old token is used at the moment. It's not just old rights, but it's just saying to the RS, hey, I'm the one who's coming back, and you stay for me.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, it's clear now. Don't have a solution, but now I understand the problem.
Okay, shall we go to the key provisioning now?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about it. So next slide. This is the quick recap. Next slide. Okay, so this is a long slide, and I'm not going to go through, but it's just to summarize what happened since last interim. Basically, we submitted a new version that was based on Daniel's review and some leftover points that were discussed during the last interim. And then in each bullet point here, you can find the commits that answer each point. So this is all of them. And also we answer Peter's review, which was from version 03. So this is quite an old review, and it took us some time to get to it, but we finally implemented it. And there is a couple of points that we want to follow up, discuss today. The first point is the normalized scope. So during last interim, we decided to add this informative reference to AIF for scope. And while we were doing that, we realized, okay, this might not be the best, this might not be adapted to this document. And then Peter review, we implemented almost everything, but there is some point that we don't agree with, and we want the working group guidance. Next slide. So from Daniel's review, the major point that I want to bring up is that we have now registered the new ACE parameters to the OAuth parameters registry and OAuth parameters CBOR mapping registry instead of the AS request creation hints registry. And this is consistent with what we do in the OSCORE profile, where we register nonce 1 and nonce 2. And so these parameters are parameters that are carrying information about the signing, signing parameters, public key encoding, and KDC challenge. So this is nothing major, but it needs to be done. So next, yeah, normalized scope. So this is the point where we should have a more interesting discussion. So right now, the scope for the document, just as a reminder, we have what we call a group identifier and a role. These are defined by the application profile. For example, the ASCII group on OSCORE defines that this is, for example, byte string and text string. And then we have a scope entry, which is an array that contain a first element is the group ID or topic identifier or whatever you want to identify your, you need to identify your security group. And then optionally, the second element is one or more roles. This could be requester, responder, it could be publisher, subscriber, or it could be a combination of those. And then finally, the scope is just a sequence, or it's an array of several scope entries. So in this example, for a group OSCORE communication, we have a group identifier, let's say that it's H01, then a group resource, which is /topic01, let's say, and then we have some roles, requester, responder, monitor, requester plus responder. Next slide. So requester means that the node is allowed to send group requests and accept group responses. And responder is someone who accepts group requests and send group responses. Then we have requester and responder, which does both, and monitor, which is accept group request but does not reply. And we were thinking the AIF. So an example of AIF is if you take, for example, the first on the right, H01 requester. This is a scope as we define it right now with the scope entry. And if we want to use AIF for the role, then we replace this requester with this CBOR array, where the first element is the group resource URI path, in this case topic -01, and then the second element is a bitmap that indicates what methods this node is allowed to do. So since this is a requester, we're assuming that it can do anything on this resource in this specific example. So we say 63, and And we're thinking, okay, is this the equivalent to the scope that we have defined in our document? And we try to do this for the several roles that we have. So let's say for the responder, we thought, okay, the responder is not allowed to request anything. So let's say that the bitmap is to 0, so no method is allowed on that resource. But there is really no way to say that something about the response, what the node is allowed to do for the response. Also, like, we kind of invented them. Can you hear me? Is it only Karsten or?
I can hear you.
I hear you fine.
Okay, so it's Karsten that dropped. Okay, so for requester and responder, we kind of made a mix, and we say, okay, we can maybe merge these two roles, and then say that this is just a array that contains both of those. And we don't have any way to say monitor, to say, okay, you're allowed to accept requests, but you're not allowed to reply. We don't have any, like, I didn't find any way to express that, because AF only specifies policy for request methods. And in our case, roles also refer to responses, or for the OSCOR, ASCII GroupCom OSCOR document. Also, another problem that the AF does not cover is that the AS does not necessarily know the group resource. So the AS is the first node that is going to send the scope. So it's going to send the scope in the token and to the client, and then the client is going to forward that. So the AS does not necessarily know the group resource, so it cannot include that in the scope. And those were two reasons why we don't know how to include AIF as a recommended, or because in this case it does not work. And if I understand what Sigdem was saying, she also was having problem with that, making AIF work for PubSub.
I think that AIF does need some changes, which is part of what my review was.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it would be good to recommend something that could be used for several documents, but it's not this one. Then maybe either, like, what type of changes do you have any idea, Jim? Or
well, the first thing is I think that we need to be able to specify strings instead of just request methods, which would deal with your responder requester issue.
okay, so the second element instead of having a bitmap, or?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So you could do both. I don't think that the first one being a wildcard should be an issue, as long as everybody understands what that is. So I don't think that the MQTT document should have a problem with that particular thing. I think you should still be able to specify +/foobar.
Sorry, I don't know.
Recognized. Oh, this is MQTT stuff.
Yeah, but is this referring to the resource, or?
This is referring to the resource.
Okay, yeah.
So the resource should be able to be any string, as long as it is acceptable both the AS and the RS.
Yeah. I don't know if Sigdem is reconnected. If you can hear me right now.
She's not connected.
I can. I'm listening. Yeah.
Okay. So if you have any, that's good.
Heard off of what you said. Just heard what Jim said. Okay. Yes, indeed. The strings can be specified in a way that all parties. the wildcard stand for.
Mhm. And then the question is, the AS does not necessarily know this resource. So then the OSCORE document, the AES in the OSCORE document would not know what to put there. So are we saying that we can also skip that first element?
But you would
What
need to,
Under what circumstances does the AS not know that element?
It does not know the group resource. It only cares about the group identifier.
Yeah.
So it does have to know the the 01 here, but doesn't have to know topic -01.
so
Doesn't care.
who translates the group ID into a resource name later on?
So the resource server is telling the client, oh, you requested this. You requested this, so you need to contact that AS. And I think it's, okay, I need to check, but.
Yeah, I'm asking this question because I just want to make sure that those translations actually are done in a secure way. So the authorization actually means something well defined. As long as you can make sure what that is, we can essentially the what AIF does is it associates names of things with permissions on things. And what we find out is that names of things are not always URI paths. And we find out that permissions on things are not always method names or method numbers. So that's the kind of generalization we have to do to make AIF more useful in a number of cases.
Francesca, as far as I know, the group name is what you should be having. So /topic-01 should be the group name.
But that's not exactly what AIF.
Right, and AIF needs to get fixed to deal with that.
Yeah, that would work, definitely.
Because the only one who can map names to group IDs is the KDF.
Yes.
KDC.
KDC.
Because it will change the group ID on a semi-regular basis. And that should not invalidate the token.
Yeah, if you can have the group name instead of the resource there, I think that would work. And then, of course, the second part, the methods, with something that also cover the response, which can be, if it's a text string, then we can define it ourselves. But the group name, I'm just thinking right now, the scope includes the group ID and the role being requester. So group ID should cover whatever group name.
Yeah, it's called GID in ASCII-group.com, but for instance, in the group OSCORE case, it really means what we call group name. So a static fixed name can be mapped with the URI of the joining resource. It's actually a name.
So then if that's like that, then instead of instead of having this equivalence between the way we define it right now and the one with AAF being an array inside the array, then it will become the same as we have right now, so with H01 with the group name or group ID or whatever we want to call it, and the second element being the requester, the text string, if AIF is going to allow text string there.
Only that the roles we have now are not intended to define what you can do with the group manager, but what you can do later on into the group. Well, I understand AF is about describing what you can do with the token consumer.
So, okay, so the point is that it would be quite big changes to end up with the same format that we have defined right now. That's what I'm getting out of it. A lot of changes in AIEF. That's
what I am very unclear is are we repeating some things with using AEF or?
so the point is, let me summarize. AIEF, as it's defined right now, does not cover the ASCII GroupCom OSCORE case, which is why I had a problem putting in the document and say we recommend the use of AIF, because for the one document that we have, it does not work. And Jim said that he has suggested changes that would make it work. And yeah, these changes seem quite big for the AIF document. So I don't know if Karsten has the time to look at those and what does he think about this, but
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. There are two aspects to AAF. One is defining an overall structure for authorization information that is relatively simple. And the other one is actually defining the elements of that structure. And I think what you said is that the elements you have don't fit. Can you tell me whether the overall structure of AAF is useful for you, or would you need a different structure there as well?
no, I think the overall structure is useful. Then it depends on what you consider the overall structure.
Yeah, so maybe it's actually worth taking the AAF document and essentially divide it into two parts. One, which has this overall structure that essentially we are using these arrays with names for things and permissions. And Jim has a proposal of what to do with the permissions as well. And the other one is defining what those names mean and what those permissions mean.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think we need to make sure that this works, of course, for MQTT as well.
Yes.
While we do that. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So I will try to be super quick.
Yeah, but just a comment regarding MQTT. If we use AIF, I'm wondering if, because I have the impression that we're replacing the topics names with maybe some stars and special characters by something that provides more information that is already known by the context of the session. So I'm wondering if we're not trying to make something harder, at least in the MQTT, in the scope of MQTT. So is the advantage that we have one single format that works for all the different protocols, or?
Reducing the number of ways that the AS has to parse the scope is a huge win.
Okay.
From implementation experience.
Okay. I see.
Yeah. So the other question from Daniel, whether having strings with wildcards in them and so on really is something we should be doing in a constrained environment. That's actually an interesting question. So maybe we should look at the MQTT use case and see how exactly this should be done there. But I think that's a bit orthogonal to the question, can we define a common structure, and can we define some default or basic meanings for the element of that structure?
Yeah. I see now. It was just that coming from one perspective, I wanted to get a wider picture of it. So.
May I clarify one aspect of the AIF draft? We all discussed that it at the moment it registers the methods as get and etc. But in the future, will it be possible, or will it be defined in a way where the profile can insert its own method? I mean, I can see it can now be defined to include publish and subscribe, but to be future-proof, if there are other permission verbs that needs to be used in the scopes, could it be that the profiles are able to register those keywords?
I think that's the direction we want to go, yes.
Okay.
Okay, but I think we're out of time, but I just wanted to finish this. So this is an issue from Peter review, and it's about terminology. And Peter wanted us to define new terminology, something called a management channel, being the channel between client and KDC, and group channel between client and other group members. And we authors don't think that this would help a lot in the document clarifying things, and would rather prefer not to define this new terminology. And also, if there are sections where it is not clear which channel we're talking, which parties are talking, then we should rephrase those. But we don't really know. Yeah, it sounds. Yeah, we don't think this would help a lot, and we would rather not do this change. So just wanted to notify the working group. And none of us is a native speaker, so yeah. That's it. And the next slide. Yeah, so now we, except for the scope issue, then we're basically done, and we would be ready to move forward with working group last call if you think. Thank you.
Managed to get all the way through section 3.3. And I don't think you're ready quite yet.
Okay, then we're looking forward to your review, Jim. Working group last call would be also to get more reviews, obviously, but the point was that we have now addressed all reviews that were still open.
Anyone? Well, so we're asking for so reviews. Anyone willing to review that? So the latest, you just provided the latest version now.
Yes, latest version and no update planned.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I will check with Jim if we're gonna start a working group last call. In any case, I will have to review that, and I'm encouraging other people to review that before or after the working group last call. I think we're pretty close to the end. Shall we continue or stop the meeting? I don't know what Jim you think.
I have time if other people want to continue.
So maybe we can go with the with one last presentation.
Fine by me.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, this was last presented at the virtual meeting we had in April as a replacement for 106. Next, please. Yeah, quick recap. This is a profile of ASCII-group.com. The client requests a token to post at the group manager, here acting as resource server, and then sends a join request, getting back in the join response the key material to use Gruposcore. Next, please. Right, since the virtual meeting, we submitted 2 revisions, version 6. After that was mostly based on a review we got from Jim on version 5. Last week, we also submitted a version 7, mostly for alignment with key-group.com and processing comments left from Peter. Just as an overview, we have added and registered a group policy. So now the group manager can signal in the joining response that in the group nodes also use the pairwise mode of Gruposcore recently introduced. And out of discussion with Jim, we also removed an old role combination, requester and monitor together, because they didn't look really useful anymore for a group member to have. But when doing that, an open point came up, and I have a slide about that later. We also added the role of verifier. So this is strictly speaking not a group member. It doesn't really join the group, but still it gets an access token to the group manager. And the only thing it is authorized to do after that is sending a request to a particular sub-resource at the group manager related to that group to retrieve the public keys of the group member and acting as signature verifier for messages that are protected in the group mode of Gruposcore. Next slide, please. Yeah, this follows some discussions we had a few meetings ago about the parameter that used to be called RS nonce. So other than changing its name to KDC challenge, we changed the text so that it's not a nonce anymore. So as long as the access token that was posted right before returning the response with this parameter is valid, this parameter can in fact be reused several times by the client to produce a signature challenge to join in multiple groups under the same token. At some point, based on application policies, the group manager can still invalidate the current KDC challenge value. And well, if that client comes again, it will get first an error response, including a new KDC challenge value to consider from then on for that token. And of course, we have data security considerations about this nonces, so to say, used for building signature challenge according to this change. But about this parameter, again, Jim noted a case where a client may not really needed one at all. And the cases where the posted access token specifies for each mentioned group in the token, only the role of monitor or only the role of verifier. So for different sub-reasons, in this case, the client doesn't need to produce any signature to prove anything. So it doesn't really need to get that value. And of course, the group manager can understand if that's the case when processing the access token. Still, we are leaving to the implementer the final choice to take advantage of this optimization, so to say, and to not return the KDC challenge in that case. But in those cases, it wouldn't be of any need anyway for the client. Next slide, please. Right, and the latest update, instead, we have updated the format to the counter-signature algorithm used in the group and the related parameters. And this happens in 2 places. The structure returned in response to the token post, and that just follows ASCII group com. And also the corresponding parameters we have later on in the joining mirrors what we have in respect. We are using the COSI capabilities as in the updated COSI registries. Update added some the group wrecking process. Member misses a latest wrecking, so it just remains with all key materials. So this node will start receiving messages that it is not to decrypt and validate anymore. At some point it realizes, and it has to go to the group manager to get updated key material. The problem is that that node can be in multiple groups, and the invalid messages it is receiving may not include sufficient hints for the node to understand to which exact group it has to point at the group manager if it is a member of multiple groups, or even at which exact group manager it should go to if it's under multiple groups of multiple group managers. So as a worst case, of course, it has to try one by one the groups of the different group managers, possibly asking for the key material version number only. And in case of mismatch, go back to that group manager for that group to request the latest key material. But we noticed, and we added in the document, that if the group ID used as context ID is formatted in a particular way that we just give as an example in the group score document, the prefix part can give a hint for discriminating between different group managers. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the open point we have on the role combination. So we have removed the combination requester monitor. We don't want, doesn't make sense to have a group member into the group with both roles together. The problem is when this should be exactly checked and enforced and by whom. The way the draft is written now, that's the authorization server. So very early in the workflow, the client requests an access token, and it has to specify a combination of roles that has to be legal already at that point in time. So requester monitor would then be valid. But then we run into some inconvenience. So think of a node that wants to join the group as requester only first, and then leave it and join it again as monitor only, and the thing should be possible. The way the draft is written now, that node has to ask two different tokens. First as requester only, join as requester. Leave, ask the second token as monitor only, post it, join it as monitor, which is pretty inconvenient. We would like to have one token only to be requested and posted. So we proposed this change where for the authorization server evaluating the access token request, any combination of role is fine at that time as long as there are roles admitted in the profile. And same for the resource server later on when the token is posted. It's only further later on when the client sends a join request that the group manager checks not only that the role combination of roles match with the token, but also that in that join request, the combination of role is legal. And at that point in any comments or issues with the possible change?
So
I don't understand why you think that getting a new token request is a problem in this case.
Oh, you can. I see it as inefficient. I would prefer to request one token only, telling me what I can do in the group, not necessarily at the same time. So I would like to postpone that fine-grained checking only when the joining request is sent.
Okay, I don't think it matters, but that's
By the way, this level of detail is fine for this document, but the general principle can actually be in ASCII group com, possibly.
So basically what you're preventing is that someone goes to the MIDA and says, yeah, I have all those roles, but I'm speaking under these roles. You always take the, if anyone makes you able to do that request or action, it's going to be valid whatever roles is involved.
Yes, I would like the token to express everything I can do in the group once and for all. And then later on, it's up to the group manager to stop me if I try exactly to take a combination that is not legal at that point.
It's not that the combination isn't legal, it's that this combination doesn't make a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, I don't object. I don't.
It's essentially an optimization to avoid requesting tokens multiple times.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to, the way the draft is written now.
Anyone has a strong feeling about that? Okay, next slide.
Yes, and last one, we expect one more revision before the cutoff, mostly to address this open point. And there is also one small other thing that Jim raised in the review of the group manager admin interface, actually. In that document now, we are defining the default values for the group parameters describing the algorithm, the counter signature algorithm, their parameters. And Jim was suggesting to move the default values for those parameters in this document instead. That should be pretty easy to do. And well, it's just about moving the section here somewhere. Other than that, including this changing, I think the document would be pretty stable to go for working group plus call 2. And we also want to advance the implementation and plan interop tests.
Okay.
I'd like to see a little bit of interop testing before doing the working group last call.
Right.
But that's at least good that you think it's a stable version.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other comment? I think we can close the meeting, or
I'm fine with that, and I can't give a good presentation in such short time for the next one anyway. So
Okay.
it's fine to stop here. Thanks for the extra time, actually.
Okay, so yeah, Jim, do you want to say something, to add something?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, so I think we had a nice meeting. We know we have homeworks for the next time. So yeah, I think we know what to do next, and thank you for your participation, and see you. I think the next meeting is the IETF meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.